Are you a music producer who struggles to make a rough mix that sounds great? If so, you're not alone. The rough mix is a critical stage in the music production process, and it can be challenging to get it right. Hi, I'm Stefan from Mix66, and in this video I want to show you how you can make a rough mix that sounds great. We will cover some basics and also some advanced techniques, all that you need to make some professional sounding rough mixes. But before we jump into the DAW, let me explain shortly why a great sounding rough mix is so important. When you are producing a band or an artist, the rough mix is the first thing that you will send them. So the rough mix is the first impression that they get from your production, or from what you have created out of their songwriting ideas. And while you could always say, well, it's just a rough mix, when the final mix is done it will sound better, many people cannot tell the difference between production and mix, so they cannot tell whether a mix is great or production is great. So if you want that your clients trust you, that they believe in your producing abilities, or that they have a great feeling working together with you, then also this first rough mix needs to sound great. Of course, you can convince them later on when the final mix is sounding great, but as people are making decisions based on feeling, not on facts, I recommend to make a great sounding rough mix in the first place. Why? Well, because a great sounding rough mix will give them the feeling that you are a great producer and that it was the right choice working together with you. So if you want to have bands that rave about your work, then you need to deliver a great sounding rough mix. So now that you know why a rough mix is so important, let's jump into the DAW to see how you can create a great sounding one. So here we have a session I have downloaded from MT Cambridge. If you want to download these tracks, then you can do it for free by clicking the link in the description. So the only thing I have done until now was to import all the tracks and set the tempo to 115 BPM. As I have never heard these tracks, the very first thing that I will do now is to listen to each single track in solo, just to get an idea how the tracks are sounding, and maybe I will also make some preliminary decisions while I go. When listening to these two kick tracks, I think I will just use the sample track, so I will delete the original kick. I think the live snare sounds great, so I will keep it. Let's move on to the toms. It seems like on the track Tom 3 there is a bad sample firing or some bad edit because there is a snare drum hit on it. This is clearly a snare, not a tom, so I will mute this section. Let's move on to the overheads. Okay, the overheads are band drummer perspective, so I will keep that in mind when making the rough mix. There is a mono room track. Okay, bass. There is amp and DI. Let's listen to both. I think the bass amp track sounds awesome, so I will delete the bass DI track. Now the guitars. Okay, there are also some DI tracks. I think the amp tracks sound great, so I will delete the DI tracks. There is an additional guitar which plays a little fill. There is just this DI track, so I have to use this one, and I will put a amp sim on it right now. I will go for a diesel. And let's choose the Lead Studio delay sound. There we go. Synth. Lead vocals.
I say this will collapse!
Okay, you can hear and also see that these are heavily compressed the way in, so maybe I don't have to use as much compression. Same applies for the backing vocals.
Watching, waiting for the ending.
Okay, so now I have an overview of the tracks I have in front of me. First important step to do is to get organized. Make sure all of your tracks are properly labeled and grouped together by instrument. This will make it easier to navigate your session and generally to make the rough mix. Also, this non-creative task can also get your head out of the production thinking into the mixing thinking, so to switch from the production head into the mixing head. And if you export your session for a mixing engineer, also he needs tracks that are properly labeled. These tracks are already labeled properly, so I will group them now, make some buses and additional auxes, and I will also color code the session to my liking. For the drums, I will make two main buses, a shell bus and a cymbal bus. In the shell bus, I put all the close mics, and in the cymbal bus, I will put the overheads and room mics. And inside the shell group, I will make additional groups for each single shell. Before we have listened to the overheads and we have heard that the overheads are band drummer perspective, so I will band the toms accordingly. I will make a group for the rhythm guitars. Okay, so now the session is organized. The tracks are buzzed to my liking and I have also color coded the whole session. This makes it easy for me to mix the song. Now, before we start to actually do some processing, I want to talk quickly about the approach that I will use today to make this rough mix. I will do something called top-down mixing. This means you start by processing the whole master bus and then do the individual processing later on. So you sculpt the sound on a global level. This has the advantage that you need less processing on every single channel and also you need less time to mix the song. This may not always be the best approach to mix a song, but for rough mixes this is a great and quick solution. And also for this tutorial I will use just stock plugins. Just to show you that you don't need any fancy plugins to make a great rough mix. So let's jump to the master bus and load an EQ. I will use a low cut to get rid of the very sub information, a low shelf to boost the lows, and a high shelf to boost the highs, to make the mix sound more finished. Then we will put a bus compressor. Ideally, you would use a SSL style compressor or a API 2500 compressor, but as I'm just using stock plugins, I will load the Reaper compressor. I will set the attack to 10 milliseconds, release 100 milliseconds is fine, ratio I will put 4:1 and a high pass at about 100 Hz. 90 is also fine. I will also enable auto makeup to make up for the gain reduction introduced by the compressor. I will set the threshold based on the kick drum. I will play the kick drum in solo and set the threshold so that the gain reduction from the stereo bus compressor is between 1 and 3 dB. Okay, we have 2 dB of gain reduction, so for now we leave it like that. And next I will put a limiter on the master bus. I will enable true peak and I will leave the threshold at 0 dB for now. But I will immediately set the ceiling to -1 dB. I do this because when I export the rough mix as MP3, the encoding algorithm needs some headroom. If you don't leave any headroom when exporting an MP3, the encoding can introduce some unwanted distortions. I will set the threshold once we have a rough balance. So now that we have our stereo bus plugins set, I will start to make a rough balance and panning. This means adjusting the volume of each track so that they all sit well together in the mix. I will start by pulling all the faders down. I will then bring up each track one at a time. I will use my ears to determine the right level for each track. While I'm making this rough balance, I will also start to pan some tracks. Okay, so now I pull down all the tracks. I will hit play and bring up each track one at a time. The kick track will be at unity gain, so the fader is at 0 dB, because this will be my reference. Remember, I also set the threshold of the stereo bus compressor based on the kick drum. Okay, so now that we have a rough balance, I will do some individual processing on the tracks. But also here my approach is to do as much processing as possible on a bass level and not on the individual tracks. Let's start with the drums. For the drums, I will just add an EQ on the shell bass and some parallel compression also only for the shell bass. I don't want to put any cymbals into the parallel compression because I think cymbals can get quite smeary when doing so. I will start with the EQ. I will also cut some 500 Hz in the shell bass because 500 Hz and metal drums just don't go well together. And I'm also hearing that the toms need an additional mid-cut. And now let's add a parallel compression. I will not use any compression on the individual tracks. I will send only the shell bass to this parallel drum compression track. Let's pull up a compressor plugin. Attack 3 milliseconds is fine, but I want a shorter release of 50 milliseconds. I will put the ratio to 8:1. Okay, now the drums are heavily compressed and I will mix this parallel drum compression into the original mix. Okay, that sounds fine. Listen to the whole drum mix. I feel like there's too much high end in the overheads. For the bass, we will cut some 300 Hz. And maybe add some 1.5K to get more attack. Let's move on to the guitars. When making a rough mix, you can go nuts by notching out all the annoying frequencies, but I have an easier solution when making a rough mix. I will just use 3 EQ moves on the rhythm guitars. A mid boost, a high mid cut and a high boost. And maybe also a low cut. Let's listen to the guitars and make these changes. We definitely need a low cut. Okay, and now the 3 EQ moves. Low mid boost, high mid cut at 4K and a high boost at about 10K. It may be that you need to adjust the volume when you are making these EQ changes. So let's listen to the whole mix. I will also put a limiter on the guitars to tuck them into the mix. And I will put the same EQ and limiter on the lead guitar. Let's adjust the volume. On the synth, I will just put a low cut, or high pass, how it is called in Reaper. Okay, that will do. Now, with vocals, we normally have two problems when it comes to mixing. First of all, recorded vocals are way too dull, you want them much brighter in the mix, and secondly, they are way too dynamic, so you need to compress them. When I do a rough mix, I have two simple solutions for that. For the problem that they are too dull, I will just cut lots of low end, and for the problem that they are too dynamic, I will just limit them. So again, rear EQ, we will cut the lows and also some low mids. Inside the mainframe, we have become the design. Much better, but there is one annoying frequency in the upper mids that I want to get rid of. I say this will collapse inside the mainframe. We have become the design. Okay, and now a limiter. Again, this is to tuck the vocals into the mix and make them sit properly. I say this will collapse inside the mainframe. We have become the design. I say this will collapse inside the mainframe. We have become the design. I say this will collapse inside the mainframe. We have become the design. I say this will collapse. And I will copy the processing from the lead vocals to the backing vocals. Okay, before we come to the final step, I want to listen to it once again and make some adjustments. I feel like the kick is a little bit too loud. And maybe the snare needs a little bit more of high end. And now I will also put a limit on the bass guitar. Again, as for the rhythm guitars, the lead guitar and the vocals, I want to tuck the bass into the mix. Tell me before remind me. Now we have a fairly decent mix. It may be a little bit flat because I have not added any effects, no reverb or delay, but this will be the last step that we do. Before I move on to adding effects, I just want to check the loudness of the mix. This is a mistake that I have seen often with rough mixes, that they are just too quiet. We humans get fooled by the loudness of a track. If a track is loud, we think it sounds better than another track which is quieter. So your rough mix needs to have a competitive loudness. I will show you how you can achieve that. On the stereo bus you will have a limiter. I will set the threshold so that the gain reduction from the limiter is 6 to 9 dB.
Tell me before remind me to fucking like to or do our planet's mistake. Tell me before remind me to fucking like to or do our planet's mistake. I see this will collapse.
There we are. Maybe some drum hits are exceeding the 6 to 9 dB range, but I'm fine with that. Let's check with a meter how loud we are.
Tell me before remind me to fucking like to or do our planet.
We are at about -9 LUFS, so this is perfect for a rough mix. So now that all sounds great, let's add some effects to make it sound more three-dimensional. For a rough mix, I will add just 2 auxes. 1 reverb and 1 delay. For a metal track like that, I think reverb is only needed for the snare drum, for the vocals, maybe for the lead guitar and for the synth. And for the delay, I guess I will send only the vocals to it. So let's add these 2 effect auxes, color code them, label them correctly. We want 100% wet. Same for the delay, and I want to use a 8-note delay with a little bit of high pass and low pass and maybe some more feedback. And I will also send the delay to the reverb to add even more depth to it. I will now send the vocals to the reverb and adjust the settings.
Tell me before remind me to fucking like to or do our planet's mistake. Tell me before remind me to fucking like to or do our planet's mistake. Tell me before remind me to fucking like to or do our planet's mistake. Tell me before remind me to fucking like.
And now I will send the snare, the lead guitar and the synth also to the reverb.
Tell me before remind me to fucking like to or do our planet's mistake. Tell me before remind me to fucking like to or do our planet's mistake. I see this world collapsing, planet's mistake. I see this world collapsing inside the map. We have become a disease. I see this world collapsing inside the map.
And now let's send the vox to the delay. Okay, I think that's it. Let's have a final listen and make some more adjustments.
Tell me before remind me to fucking like to or do our planet's mistake. Tell me before remind me to fucking like to or do our planet's mistake.
So there you have it. This is my blueprint for creating a great sounding rough mix. And if you are a music producer who struggles to take your career further, then I have something for you that you might want to check out. I have created a free assessment that looks at your career and identifies your weak point. Remember, your career will grow only to the level of your weakest link. Just like a signal chain. where the final sound is limited by the worst piece of equipment within the chain. If you want to identify and then eliminate your bottleneck, then check out the Mixxx Career Diagnosis. Just click the link in the description and you can start the free questionnaire now. I hope you have learned something today. If you have any more questions, then leave them in the comments and see you next time. Bye.